My love, Nicole.
Hello.
Hi, love. I'm so excited to be here with my beloved, one of my soul sisters, Nicole Oman. Nicole and I met many years ago, but we became friends really through the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
We both were kind of lost, somewhat in a dark place, and the moment you and I connected, we had like a coffee date for 3 hours because there's a recognition between us, like we are sisters. And I feel like you ever since our bond is very strong.
I just want to say that you are one of the people that helped me believe in people again. We connected through a time where I lost a lot of friendships and I was feeling really sad and lonely, and you helped me restore that faith again.
You'll never be alone. You always have me in this physical presence or in the spiritual presence, no matter where we are. Here we are. Rebranding God podcast. So I invited you for this interview because you are the... First of all, let me introduce Nicole. We got a little sidetracked with our emotions here. But Nicole Oman is a
Divine
coach.
feminine.
That's right. We break down in tears right away. Nicole is an incredible spiritual coach, relationship coach, a healer, a shaman. And in times that I am confused, I call Nicole to clarify what's happening with the world and the energies right now. And Nicole speaks so beautifully, and she is the embodiment of the divine feminine. So these days, depending who you're listening to in terms of podcasts or reading the books, there's this big conversation about the divine feminine and why it's so important for us to connect with the feminine, not genders. We're not talking genders. We just talk about the energies of the feminine and the masculine, or the yin and the yang, as they talk in the East. And we have become a very patriarchal, very masculine driven society. And there's nothing wrong with the masculine or the feminine. And yet when this force is becoming imbalanced, and we're going to talk what that looks like in our everyday life, what happens in our personal, we're just going to talk a lot about the personal level and then the collective, what happens in the personal level when our feminine energy or our masculine energy gets out of balance. And it's my intention that through this conversation today, we're going to really share a message with our audience of how to balance those forces and why it's so important. So, first of all, Nicole, tell us a little bit, before we go to Divine Feminine, a little bit about your story. Like, you are somebody that, we can tell you're so connected with the divine. And again, I'm using the word divine here, but you can replace by source, by energy, by light, by love. When did this connection begin for you? Was it always there?
It was before I remember. I was a very strange child. I remember when I was little, I had all these memories. And I always felt connected to God. I would actually contemplate God when I was a child. I would ask tons of questions. My mom was Catholic, but she didn't put me in church. And when I was 7, I asked her to put me into church because I needed to know more. And so God has always been in the back of my mind, in the back of my heart. It's always been a calling for me. But I have all these different parts of my journey where I feel connected to God. When my grandmother passed away, I had a new connection to God. after I got out of my teenage years, I got a new connection to God. And one of my biggest, I think, roots for my connection to God and the divine feminine connection was when I went to India when I was in my early 20s. And I stayed in an ashram in Kerala, India, for 3 months with a guru named Amma. And Amma was, her name means mother, divine mother. And so when I lived there, I started to understand and see the divine feminine form of God.
Wow.
And it's this beautiful essence of God in action.
That's beautiful. Do you think most people, I'm going to talk about the people who kind of have an aversion to God, they feel very separated from God. Do you think that's, we can say it's religion, and is God seen as a masculine energy for a lot of people?
Well, I would ask you, do you think that for a lot of people, the masculine is being worshipped more than the feminine?
If we go back to religions, yes.
Yeah, so on a collective scale, I'd say absolutely yes.
Yes.
Because most people, their connection through God is religion. So most of the population is either Buddhist. Actually, Buddhism is one of the most popular forms worldwide. I think it's more popular than Christianity just because of...
Really? Wow.
But Christianity, Islam, Jewish religions, they all predominantly worship masculine energy. And that is I think the foundation and the conditioning that we all have. Whether we are consciously or subconsciously aware of it, but subconsciously on this planet right now, predominantly we look at, if you ask most people, is God male or female? They probably would say male.
Yeah.
Right? And that's really interesting because what psychologically does that mean for all of us? What do we worship? What do we prefer? And we don't even realize it. And the interesting thing is, as I learn about the way to look at God as feminine, and what's interesting is the feminine always says right away when you connect with her, it's not feminine, it's both. She doesn't even want to take responsibility that
I am both.
that I am a woman here too, right? But when we look at the feminine aspects to God, it's more about love.
Yeah.
It's love-oriented instead of worship-oriented.
Correct. What a great way to correct. Don't even think about it's feminine or masculine. It's just love. And that's my own personal connection with God. I don't think God feminine or masculine. Because sometimes I call Mother help me, or I might say Father help me. And at the end, the energy that is underneath those words, it's unconditional love. So for me, the connection with God is just unconditional love. It's energy. It's the energy of creation. So some people might say, yeah, God is actually, if there's a gender, be feminine, because if God is the creator of all, not if, is the creator is feminine. And then there's, again, the fight. It's feminine or masculine. And we're not having this conversation to debate feminine and masculine because it's none and all at the same time. So
the reason why I wanted to bring in the divine feminine is just because it's allowing that balance to meet that masculine kind of consciousness that's already seated. There's something imbalanced. And I totally agree. It's both, it's neither, it's all. But when we come down to the principles of learning how to be God in action.
God in action. What does that mean? Say more. God in action.
I think God in action is the actions that we take that are in harmony with God or with love.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime that you love selflessly, you're God in action. I think we think that God is somehow separate from us, that we have to worship something above us or beyond us. But what the feminine aspect of God is telling us is that God is incarnate through every piece of creation, and that God is not separate from anything. And every time you act in a way to serve another, or a way to serve yourself that will serve others, you are in harmony with the vibration of God. And that is God in action. That's how we receive love on the planet, is through just connecting with others from a place of love.
Yes. So you use the word balancing. So how does this imbalance between the feminine and masculine, how is that showing up in an individual's life?
Well, I think that's kind of personal to a person, to each individual person.
In general.
In general. Let's do a topic. So, in work or in relationship, what do you...
Let's say in work, because our culture is so achievement, goal-oriented, always wanted to be doing, accomplishing, get busy. So let's tackle that.
So in work, what we're connected to right now, especially corporations, and what we're worshiping is money. Mm-hmm. And so if we worship money, we are going to be putting God outside of ourselves again, right? And It's not love.
Money becomes the God.
Money becomes the God. So what happens is we overproduce. We're not looking at what we're doing. We're looking for productivity and profitability instead of sustainability and happiness and fulfillment amongst everyone that is connected to that company. So the reason why we're off balance with this is because the way that we are being programmed is this is what's important, right? We have more fears around money than we do around, connecting to our children.
Yes.
And that makes me a little bit.
That's a mic drop. Yes, we worship money more than our relationships. Unconsciously. Most people are doing that. Nobody's waking up and choosing money over relationships, and yet the actions are not God-oriented or love-oriented actions. Yes. Well said. How is that showing up in relationships, this imbalance?
This is an interesting... Relationships are my favorite thing.
We will do an entire episode about relationships. So give us a summary, like in a relationship, how is the imbalance showing up?
Well, where do I want to go here? There's so many different aspects that we are imbalance in our relationships. We don't know how to communicate. We don't know how to not problem solve or problem resolve, but it's like we don't know how to connect anymore. People have a very interesting idea of what relationships should be. And what they are is love expressed by two people. And so that's forgiveness. That's taking responsibility. This isn't demanding, because the masculine is demanding. It could be suppressive and controlling, the masculine energy in general. And the way that we're relating to each other is we're trying to control or fix each other. Mm-hmm. And we're trying to make each other perfect in our eyes instead of looking at the idea of love and connection is by understanding that holding space for somebody and allowing them to go through a hard time instead of leaving them or trying to control them. I hope that makes sense.
Yep.
Right? So these are ways to have better love-based, God-based relationships. And here's the big one. Can you see your partner as God?
I would hope so.
Right?
Yes. It's a practice. Speaking of how do we take actions, there are God actions every day. It's even today, I'll give an example. Practicing yoga next to this man who was sweating a lot. And I was getting a little bothered by how much sweat, and I'm like all concerned about him being in my space. And what I did at that moment, I practiced looking at him as God, as Christ consciousness, as just me. But it's such a simple practice.
That's such an awesome.
It's such a simple thing, and I always tell people, start with the easy stuff. Start with the guy sweating next to your yoga mat, because that was enough to create a distraction for me and to put me in a place of judgment. And I know when I'm in a place of judgment, I am in a place of separation. So it's so small, and yet it's such a practice that will accumulate, and it gets easier and easier for me to not be bothered by somebody like that, or a driver that cuts me off and flips me the finger like yesterday. You know, the life is still happening, and the things that used to bother me don't bother me anymore. So can I look at my partner as God? Yes. And at times that I probably won't be able to see my partner as God is the time that I know I'm disconnected myself from God, from the divine. So if I'm separated, then I'm going to automatically separate my partner as well.
So I know you want to get into relationship. And when you're in relationship, right? When you're in a fight and you are arguing and there's deep stuff, because what's beautiful about relationships and God-connected relationships is your deepest shit comes up with each other.
Yep.
And the trauma comes up with each other. And to stay there, this is going to be maybe a little controversial now, because, you know, we have all these different languaging of narcissists and all these different things that it's really easy to feel victim in relationship. But when we see the other as God, we hold space for that to come through.
Yes.
And we allow it to transmute by holding space without judgment. And when that happens, all your relationships will transform. Me and Ryan have been together for 19 years, and we grew up together. And we've had to learn how to hold space for each other and not give up on each other when our dark sides come up. And we don't know how to love each other through our pain. Now, I'm not saying that if you're in a toxic, like a really bad relationship, not to leave. I am a child from domestic violence. And the best thing my mother could have done for the sake of love is loving herself enough to leave. And she left. And because of loving herself that deeply, my dad now doesn't do drugs anymore. He ended up going to prison after she left, and he found his heart again. So the best thing she did for herself was leave a bad situation. So this is not to say stay in a really toxic relationship, but I am saying when you are in a committed relationship and you have two people that are willing to see each other in this beautiful, loving, God-based way. And by the way, I couldn't make him willing. He had to become willing to work on himself and take responsibility for his peace. But when you find real love in relationships, it's this beautiful divine growth with two people. And that is also love in action. Mm-hmm. And I've had to learn that with Ryan, and I've had to learn that with my children. Yes. Love in action is being with my girls.
Yes.
It's looking at them and seeing that they're two very different people. I have to parent them differently. I have to love them differently. I have to meet their needs differently. And we're moving in a couple months. And we are moving back to Florida. We live in Colorado now. And I realized I realized that, oh my gosh, this isn't just me and what I want to do. This is going to affect the foundation of my children's life, mm-hmm. right? My oldest daughter's going into middle school next year. My youngest is in kindergarten, and she doesn't learn well in public school. She is a little bit more of a Montessori learner. And I had to really look at both of their needs and see if I can find a place that's right for them. And I realized in that moment, like, wow, I almost got to toot my own horn, like, wow, good for you for realizing that they had needs to be met.
Yes.
And I had to really see them in their own way. And just by being present with our children, I believe that's love in action.
Absolutely. And that's how I speak, especially people who have hard time even believing that there's a higher power, there's a God, there's source. If you connected with love, connect with your heart, that's it. You are connected with the divine. Either you want to use that label or not, that is connection, because God is love. God is unconditional love. So I get to experience God, love in action with my friends, in my relationships, in nature. So I love the summer relationships.
Hold on, I want to ask you a question.
I'm supposed to be interviewing you. Go ahead.
How do you experience love in action in your life, Alex?
Oh, with my animals. I have 3 beautiful animals that when I connect with them, to me it's connection with the divine. I have practices, especially in the morning, where I just go inside. I'll go into a meditation and I evoke that vibration inside me. I call the energy, and I can get in a state that is very deep. And the question is like, how do I know I'm connected with the divine? I would bring my entire body gets flooded with love, like if I was falling in love with somebody at that moment and there's no lover next to me. It's just me making that deep connection with God. And I feel flooded to a point that sometimes I cry. And it's such a deep, that is the true unconditional love. It's the love that is never going to leave you. It's never going to judge you. It's the love that doesn't care what you do for a living, how much money you make, or if you are homeless. It doesn't care. I always make a joke. God doesn't give a shit about what you do. And God doesn't even care if you abandon God. It's this absolute unconditional love. That's why I say we abandon God. I abandon God when I close my heart many times. So when I was hurt, when I was injured, I closed my heart a few times through my life. And my commitment now with God is like, I would never leave you again. And it's interesting because a lot of people, which will lead me to a question for you, but that's how I connect through. If you ask me, what is my direct practice that makes me feel very connected to God, it's meditation and prayer.
When you speak in that way, I can feel your experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's hard, right? As much as I want to inspire people to have this connection, we can't teach anybody how to really connect with God. And yet, that connection is already within you, with each other. And you use your free will, basically, and make a decision. I want to learn how to connect with God. And with practices, some people choose the uses of psychedelics, plant medicines, MDMA, go to an ashram in India, and yet it's an individual journey of just sitting and making that connection, and it's available to every single person. This is, I want to even repeat this. This connection with God is available to every human being. Nobody's excluded. The person in jail who has committed murder is not excluded from this love. Every single human, it doesn't matter their history. It doesn't matter if they did horrible things. This connection is to all of us. We all walk in this path. Some of us are choosing, hey, let's go. And some people might not be consciously choosing. And yet, we all walk in this path. And the fact that we have these practices, it doesn't make us special. The fact that I have this deep connection with God and I bring God into everything I do, it does not make me special. Because we all have this connection. It's a choice. And
the only reason why our connections might feel deeper is because we prioritize it.
Yes.
It's our practice.
It's a practice. We prioritize. I will put God before my work. I will put God even before my physical relationships. God comes first. And then God is just present in everything. And I only say comes first because a lot of times we need to do the practices first to really embody this energy. So we do the practices. This is why we pray. This is why we meditate. We might have a yoga practice to really bring the embodiment until you come to a point that you don't even need to set the time. If you ask people, I think like Eckhart Tolle and other advanced spiritual teachers, they don't even set aside time to meditate anymore because their life becomes a meditation. Their life becomes the practice. So,
and your life can become a practice.
Yes.
It's so amazing.
It's so amazing. It becomes so much easier. I always make a joke. It's like, wow, I don't have to make decisions myself anymore. I connect with my heart, and that knowing that comes from connect with God is the decision. Then I choose to show up in that action. So we're talking so much about connection. Thanks for your beautiful question. Why so many people feel not worthy of this love, not worthy of God? I literally hear people saying, some of my own clients saying that God forgot me, or it's really that feeling, I'm not worthy of God's love. What do you think that stems from?
I think, again, it's an individual question. But really, if we go into our own, this is a question for everybody. Mm-hmm. Where do you edge love out? Where do you not allow yourself to be loved?
Where do you edge love out?
And where does that stem from?
That's a lovely, yeah.
Because when people come to me for healing, or for, a lot of people come because they want to get into a relationship. This goes right with God. Okay? Why don't you have a relationship? Where do you not allow yourself to receive love?
Mm-hmm.
It might be a worthiness. I don't feel worthy to receive love. I'm not worthy to receive God, right? And so then that's when we separate ourselves from this energy and we forget that it's always available. Mm-hmm. But there's something, call it wounding, call it trauma, call it worthiness issues, call it fear, call it doubt, call it shame, whatever you want to call it, where we have that stuck in our psyche, stuck in our bodies. Because I think, honestly, it's not just us on an individual layer, it's us on a collective layer that has a trauma that we feel separated from love and from God. And when we start to connect and realize that it's right here, it's right here, and that we always have the choice to love and to receive love.
Fear.
It's fear.
So let's speak of fear. Where do we even go with this word? Fear. It's a separation.
We all have it. I still have it.
If you study texts like A Course in Miracles, the Course in Miracles will state there's only two energies in the world. It's either love or fear. And fear is an illusion. It's an illusion, and yet we all have experienced tremendous fear. Fear of not having a relationship, fear of getting old, fear of getting sick, fear of not having enough money. I would say all the clients that come to us, they come basically with that place of deep fear of something. And we helping them to dissolve that illusion of fear. So, for the people who are living there with a lot of fear, where do they even start?
You start by having the awareness that you are not that fear.
Yes. Well said. Recognize, first of all, that there's fear present, because in this society, by the way, a lot of people say, I'm so stressed out, I'm so overwhelmed.
I have anxiety.
That translates into I'm acting in a frequency of fear. So just admitting that there is that fear. And what is interesting is that a lot of people have fear of letting go of that fear. A lot of people actually have fear of letting go their anxiety. A lot of people have fear of letting go of their stories that are keeping them in fear. So that's the paradox, because consciously everybody says, I want to let go, and yet there's this fear of letting go all either the trauma, the wound, or the narratives that are creating that fear. And this is one of the reasons I do this work. I release this podcast because I want to give more messages of why it's so important for us right now to do the work of releasing and letting go our fear for the collective. So let's go there. Why do we really need to let go of fear?
It's keeping us from connecting.
Yeah.
It's keeping us from loving. It's keeping us from trusting. Trusting one another.
Yep.
Trusting the process.
It's keeping us separated.
Yeah.
It's keeping us sick. Lonely.
Yeah. Isolated.
And you and I were talking the other day. It was such a great conversation a few weeks ago when we were speaking about the difficulty of people meeting people, making sustainable long-term connections. And you said something brilliant. You said, through the pandemic, for instance, we learned how to fear each other, because there's this fear of like, I can die if I get close to people. We never care, but a lot of people do. There's this, because for me it was like, anyway, that's another conversation. That's another conversation. But what I've noticed through the pandemic is how fear was amplified, like tenfold.
On every layer.
Tenfold
on
amplified.
Every layer.
So,
hatred.
Yes.
Fear of death, fear of illness, fear you're going to kill a loved one, fear of racism and homophobia and everything.
Fear of speaking. I couldn't even speak of my choices, or my health choices, and how I chose to navigate the pandemic. Even that became a very polarized subject. So it was a big amplifier of fear. But
there's also this idea that when we're going through a shift, when we're going through a massive awakening, a massive opening of the heart and into love, there's a purge. And there's a purge of fear that has to happen so we can make a different decision. And so this is all, all of that came out, all of that negativity and the fear, and we were being taught to be separate. But I feel that more now than ever, we are looking for things that feel more real. Not just money, not just politics, not just the fear, but we're more of us. I found more people trying to look for their people, their relationships, their tribes. And so we're in a state right now of choice. Mm-hmm. What do we worship? Do we worship fear? Or do we worship love? And bringing it back to what God really is, and not what we were told God is. And hopefully there was a purge, and hopefully we are clearing this immense amount of fear, separation, and hatred. Because the truth is, this isn't a new thing. We've been separate for years. Nothing is new.
To me, the veils have just been lifted. It has been happening for a few years, and through the pandemic, it became very clear. We just saw more through the veils of illusion of the fear. Let's bring back to the divine feminine.
Spaghetti, bring it back.
So if we speak of the feminine energy as the energy of creation, nurturing, tenderness, softness.
It's not always soft, but...
Well, let's talk about that. Because
the feminine is all the
it's
things.
not about soft, and yet, is it correct to say that there is strength in the softness?
There's a beautiful strength in softness.
So let's speak about that, because there's this fear of if I become tender and soft. This has been a process for myself, because my entire life I create a very masculine mask to protect myself by being physically fit and strong, by being an athlete, by being in a way aggressive. And just in the recent years I realized that that's not my true self. That is not who I really am. That was a protection. So I think I'm sharing this because I think it resonates with a lot of women, especially the high achiever women and the athletes, the women who identify as very strong. And I don't want that to be confused anymore, that we cannot be soft and strong at the same time.
Do you want me to give you a word?
Please.
Vulnerability.
Yes.
Vulnerability. And that's the softness of a woman. Because sometimes we think of the word soft. And the word soft doesn't resonate with us. But the word vulnerable is what that softness really is. It's allowing ourselves to open up, to receive, to be real and authentic. And if you look at it, the way I am sorry, I'm taking it sexual, but
you take it sexual.
I'm taking it sexual. But if you look at the way a woman receives, in the way that we have sex, it's way more vulnerable for a woman in a sexual relationship than a man. So going it back to the fundamental feminine energy is vulnerable. But it doesn't mean that it's open to attack. Vulnerability, when people define that word, we think we are being open to attack. But that's not what vulnerability really is. It's having trust that if we open ourselves up, we won't get attacked.
No.
And that is this opening, this deepening. The feminine allows for healing, for love to enter, for things to grow with patience instead of force. The feminine allows for process instead of just being goal oriented, but learning in that time and space. And that's vulnerable because we're not guaranteed that what we're doing is going to work out. That's vulnerability.
Yes, and the other aspect of the word vulnerability, the origin of the word vulnerability, is the ability to be wounded. It's our trust that, yeah, we can be wounded and
still
stable, strong.
So the interesting thing is, when we're talking about love, we usually think of what? The heart, right? So when we are connected to the heart, and if you know anything about any spiritual practices or anything, I utilize, and right behind Alex is my chakra singing bowls. And right in the center is the heart chakra, and this is the connection to love. And the Sanskrit word for the heart chakra is anahata. And the direct translation of the word is unstruck. So when we're truly in the vibration of love, when we're truly in the vibration of the heart, nothing can actually wound us.
Well said.
Nothing can actually strike us. The heart doesn't break. What breaks is our expectation.
Yes.
What breaks is our disappointment for what we thought or how we thought our life should have worked out.
The stories we make about it.
That's what breaks. But when we're in our heart, when we're in love, when we're in the vibration of God incarnate or embodied in the heart chakra, we are unstruck. Because we realize that there's beauty and love, even if we're suffering in that moment, because something does hurt. Having the awareness that love won't wound us. We can allow ourselves to be vulnerable because no matter what we go through will bring us closer and deeper to God.
If you listener just take this last part of this entire podcast and just have this takeaway that in a true place of love, you actually cannot be wounded. That's beautiful. Is that the same thing as say when we are in our true self or truest self, in that place we can, or highest self, we cannot be wounded there?
I wouldn't say our highest self, because that always says like above us, but our truest self.
Truest self.
Our most embodied self, the most real self we have.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's that part of us that is intact. In fact, this is the paradox. We do so much work to heal our childhood wounds or trauma. And yet, in our truest self, there's no wounds, there's no trauma. It has always been intact.
Because you have the wisdom of understanding.
Yes. This is why I think it's so important to emphasize that for anybody who is in the path of healing, my joke is, even for those skeptical ones that don't talk spirituality, don't speak of God or higher power, if you are on the path of healing, eventually you would encounter the divine. Because you can separate this path of healing and the divine. Would you agree with that? They're not separated. It's the same. It's the same
thing.
Because the path of healing is a path of walking back to the essence of love, to the essence of your heart. And there's exactly where you're going to meet the beloved God.
You meet yourself.
You meet yourself.
You meet yourself.
And one of the best moments for me in this journey was the moment that I remember was in deep practice, meditation, connect with love, and I realized that I was the one that I've been looking for my entire life. And that it's not egotistical at all to say that. That is the essence, because until we make this deep connection, at least what I have found in this path, until you make this true connection with your heart, with yourself, and in that sense you are connected with God, we are all longing for God because we keep doing things outside. We think it's a new job, moving to a new state, finding a partner, finding love, or we put outside. In our deepest long, it's really for the divine, for this connection. And then, of course, everything in our lives from that place of connection becomes beautiful, like your relationship or work, what we do. That's why I said earlier, it's like it's when you bring God into everything you do, it's heaven on earth. We really create heaven on earth. We have that choice. Like you said, you're either moving towards fear, you worshiping fear, or you worship God, love. And that's a choice.
Well, what I would say there,
Please.
that's what true self-love actually is having the deep understanding and the meeting of who you are.
Yes. And that is not in a book or 10 self-help books.
And you have to do it for yourself.
I have found that I was searching for all this fulfillment in books. I was the one that would devour 1 to 2 books a week because I was seeking this connection so badly. And it wasn't until I went to some psychological depths that I realized that I had to really go inside and stop searching outside. And it was that collapse, those dark nights of the soul, was one of the best things that could have happened to me.
That's what they call the death before the death. The death before the death.
And that's why we say, I say a lot of times, I will die 1,000 times for you, God.
And we do.
And we do. And we do. And we speak of the psychological death. And let's circle back to fear. I believe a lot of people hold into fear because the aspect of the physical self, the ego, is so afraid of letting go those stories, those masks, the personalities that the ego holds into that, and that's when a lot of people feel that separation inside themselves. Ego death is no joke.
It's all your identities. And it's letting go of the attachment of being you. And all the things you've cultivated or you've wrapped your little mind around, that what is important. And when you have an ego death, all of those things get cut or questioned. And you feel like you're spinning for a second. Because you realize that everything you deemed important wasn't as important as you thought it was. And you start to come to a deeper understanding of what really is important. And you become a very different person. And by the way, the ego never really fully dies.
No.
You become another personality and part of yourself. And you then attach to other things. And then you have another one. But what is important is every time you have one of these deaths, it gets you closer and closer and closer to who you truly are and what you're truly here to do.
Amen.
And experience. Really.
Yeah. It's fascinating because so many people have this fear of the unknown. Like, who am I if I'm not the high achiever? Who am I if I'm no longer the athlete? Who am I if I'm no longer the mother because the kids are all going to college? And yet, there's a big aspect of us that craves novelty, that craves change. So it's in this path we learn how to dance with this paradox of you want something new and yet you are scared of the unknown, because there's this false identity, this false sense of safety and security inside, that you think that job is giving that to you, or that relationship is giving that to you. So you think if you give up your story, you're giving up safety and security. And that's the biggest illusion. You're not giving up safety and security, because the safety and security is an energy that you're going to only feel that when you connect with the divine.
Well, and here's the funny thing about it. And we know this because we went through it. Just because you let go of the attachment to the things that you do doesn't mean you have to stop doing them.
Exactly.
They just don't become your
identity. They don't define you anymore.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean you're going to quit your job today or leave the relationship.
No.
You just don't allow those things to define you. As I say, the egoic mind makes a terrible master. So the dance is like, can you trust your heart and let your heart lead the way?
That's a big ask.
It takes tremendous courage.
Yeah. It does.
Because we have these stories that when I was younger and I followed my heart, I got so hurt.
Because we
misunderstand. That's what it comes from. It's a misperception.
We misunderstand the heart. Because I followed my heart, and I've ended up in weird dead ends and detours.
It hurt many times.
But now, in hindsight, what's beautiful about hard times is hindsight is always 20/20.
Yes.
And you do see the like, oh, that's why I had to go through that. But the heart is wise. The heart might not be here for money. The heart might not be here for what you are pursuing. The heart's here for something else. Mm-hmm. So when you follow your heart, you follow the truth, and you follow
my favorite word. You just used my favorite word.
You follow the truth, because you can't connect to anything when you're following your heart that's not the truth. So if you run into a dead end, it's because you needed to hit that dead end. And when you did get hurt, it's because we misunderstood what hurt was. Mm-hmm. It was an opportunity for us to grow. And that is what we're here to do. This is God's way of being able to learn, mm-hmm. and to experience and to mature and to develop and to grow.
Through us.
Through us.
Through us.
As we do it. Mm-hmm. And that's the beauty of life. That's why we came here. We didn't come here for money. We came here to grow up and to mature and to connect and to love and to enjoy this experience if we can, if we remember to.
And it is changing, because I'm going to defend the millennials. They are so judged by the society, saying that they are lazy or they don't want to work hard, they don't have ethics. Actually, they're not innovative. True. That's not true. They just came to break this program that said you have to work hard for money, even involves doing something that you don't like, or you have to be available 24/7. That generation came here to say, no, I'm not doing that, and I'm very grateful. They came here to help us to break that system, because, especially in our culture, we are in the United States, we became the sickest, the most anxious, and the most depressed, and the most obese society in the world. So if we're not all pausing to evaluate our choices with achievement and money, and if you are caught in that cycle, this is just an invitation. I was in that cycle too. is an invitation for you to contemplate and reflect of what your values and your dreams really are in this life, what it's really about for you, and then align your actions with that. Because like you said so beautiful, we didn't come here to be doers, achievers. It's great that there are a lot of people there creating amazing things, working hard, making the money. It's great. And yet there's a point for everybody that if the fulfillment is not there, we know that can be a very dark moment for a lot of people that can lead. We see this in Hollywood a lot, and the celebrities. We see those moments when we look on the outside as somebody that has everything and they opt out of this life.
Or they have an addiction.
Or they have an addiction because they're in so much pain, and addiction is just there to help them numb the pain. So,
and we don't even have to look at celebrities. We see it all the time.
It's all the time.
It's everywhere.
It's in our towns.
We might be chasing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
The wrong dingling carrot.
So if you're chasing anything, I was certainly a chaser for most of my life. If you're chasing anything, that's a really good time. I hope you receive this love, this invitation to pause. Because this life is not about chasing.
What is it about, Alex?
Love.
Yay.
Love and connection. Love and connection.
And what I hear from you is being.
It's being.
Being with yourself and with God, and connecting to yourself.
Yeah. And don't confuse. A lot of people have this fear that if they just make the time to just be, that the bills are not going to get paid. They're going to become lazy. They're not going to be driven anymore. Let me share something with you. As you become more connected with your calling, with your heart, with truth, you're going to feel something that my teacher called hema. It's a calling. When you start really connecting with your truth, you be called to act, because you're going to be called to be a service. And that's the most beautiful thing. It's like when your work, when your job, it's no longer something just to make money or pay the bills. You become not a servant, but you are a service to God, to your community, to the planet. So please don't misperceive this as if you just start really connect with your heart, you're not going to want to do anything. Or you will. And those actions feel much easier. There's no effort because they're not hard. So I find that this new era that we're entering now is this whole concept of hustling and working hard and pushing and striving. It's breaking, because when you acting from the truth, it doesn't feel hard. It doesn't mean you might not work 12, 13 hours a day. It has nothing to do with that. It just doesn't feel hard.
Because you're working in alignment with yourself and with what you love. I want to bring into, this kind of brings it kind of full circle
back, yeah.
When I lived in the ashram with Amma, her entire community was based off of one principle, and it was seva. And seva means selfless service. To be in service to others, to your community, to God, and to love. And Amma talked about how her religion was the religion of love. And a lot of people want to look at her as God. And she is definitely an embodiment of that consciousness. She by far definitely is. If you don't know who she is, I would suggest looking up some of the things she has done. It's beautiful. AMMA. And she's the hugging saint. And I've watched her hug 20,000 people in a day.
Wow.
20,000 people in a day. And she does this for 2 to 3 weeks at the ashram when she comes in. And she gets up at 9 in the morning and hugs until 4 in the morning. She goes in, meditates, and then she wakes up and does it the next day for the same amount of time. She doesn't ask for anything. She has things there that you can buy or donate, but she doesn't ask. She hugs. And then the people around her, when you live at the ashram, you either chop vegetables or go pick vegetables in Tulsi tea in the gardens, or do trash duty, or I had the weirdest seva of them all. I had to shave people's heads.
Oh, great.
Yeah, because that's what I, that's my weird self. But that was because they did a treatment on people that took a lot of the mental scatteredness. And so they would shave somebody's head and put oil on the crown of the head and pull up a lot of the toxicity. It's an Ayurvedic technique. So I know that sounds weird. I wasn't like in a cult shaving heads, but
service.
I had to give context to that. But no, it was for a medical treatment.
Yeah.
But everybody did something to serve another in that community, in that ashram. And what it created was connection. What it created was respect and reverence for each other. Everybody pitched in. And no job was better or worse than the other. Not even Amma's job of hugging 20,000 people, because around her was so many people helping them get to her, helping them get into the line, wiping their faces, doing all that needed to happen, and everybody worked as one and in harmony. So when we're in service to others, it creates harmony in our life. It creates connection. And that's what becomes our priority instead of money. And the funny thing is, everyone was taken care of.
Yes.
Every single person in that ashram.
There's no lack.
Was taken care of. Everybody ate. Everybody slept. Everybody did what they needed to do. And it was harmony. And it was love in action. It was God in action. And that taught me so much of, wow, they have, the people there in that community have a lot less than we do. But they have an abundance of gratitude for everything.
And reverence, another one of my favorite words. Gratitude and reverence for what they have. They don't have the disease of wanting more. That creates a lot of suffering here.
They have the desire to be of service and to love others. That's interesting. The desire to love instead of the desire to fear.
Yes.
And that in itself, if you have the desire to love, that means you're already loving and that you're already on this path to finding what God really is. But the choice is really, what are you going to worship? Love or fear?
Wow. What a good place to
Where did that go?
almost close. We're getting there. It's a choice, and then there's a path of aligning your actions, your emotions, your behaviors with that choice. So there's work to be done. Every day. Every day.
Every day is
Because
work.
it's very easy to get caught in this very material world. So, Nicole, this is a question I ask all my guests. If it was your last day on this physical planet, and you had a camera and a microphone that was you were going to broadcast to the entire humanity. And before you transcend to another dimension, you want to leave humanity with one message. What would that message be?
Oh my God, my sense of humor just popped in.
You can bring humor.
I was going to say, good luck.
I'm out.
What
That
would
was
I
a joke,
say?
but
What would I say? I don't know. Like, I keep going like funny. I'm like, fun while it lasted. Yeah. I mean, there's not much that you can say. Thank you.
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thanks for the ride.
Thanks for the ride. We'll leave there. I think you shared your message to this conversation by using the word connection a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that's what I will leave with, is the connections that I did have. My family. When you asked me that, as soon as you asked me that question, the first thing I saw was, if there was a camera, I'd probably push the camera and say, I don't need to say. My whole life I've been talking. My last moment would be with my girls, with my husband, with the animal that I have at that moment, and all the other people that come into my life before I get to that place. And really, I think my word would be, thank you. Thank you for the ride.
That's beautiful. What's the best way for people to connect with you?
Through our website. So me and my husband do a lot of work together. Our website is Guided by the Omans.
I will put a link on the notes.
.com. I love to hold space for people's process. I think that most people have their own innate way of connecting to themselves, to their guidance, to their inner self, and to their truth. And what I love to do is hold space for someone to find that path, to connect to themselves, and to connect to what is blocking them from connecting to themselves, to find deeper love in their life.
Yeah.
And deeper fulfillment.
And you do live Facebook readings every Friday?
Mm-hmm.
So
on Facebook.
We'll put a link so you can all jump into that free guidance by Nicole every Friday.
That's
and
the other part of myself. I also read tarot, but the way that I read tarot is a lot about having perspective and clarity of what you're stuck in. And I also bring my kind of silly humor, and who knows what comes out of my mouth most days.
It's very fun. I would suggest you all jump into her live Facebook on Fridays if you can, and if you can do live, you can find her on Facebook and watch after. There's a lot of humor and fun with you.
And sex talk and
everything.
Things that I have, relationship talks.
I so enjoyed this conversation with you. I love you, my friend.
Wait, I have to say it. Thanks for the ride.
My pleasure. Thanks, everybody.